Thank you for being here. Now, close your eyes if you want, and let us begin. Before there were walls of gold in Asgard, before Midgard learned the taste of bread and blood and song, before the elves sang their bright secrets and the dwarfs cooled their furnaces, there was a feeling more than a place. A cold without pity, a heat without mercy, a silence so deep it could be mistaken for eternity. The old Norse storytellers did not begin with a tidy globe floating in darkness. They began with tension, with extremes, with the sense that existence was something that had to be earned from a universe that was not eager to give it. In the farthest distances of memory lay the yawning gap called Ginnungagap, a vast emptiness that was neither home nor enemy, merely the space where the first conflict could become the first creation. To one side spread the ice and mist of Niflheim, to the other burned the roaring furnace of Muspelheim, and between them, where frost met flame and melted into a strange living steam, the first heartbeat of myth took shape. We will come to those realms later. Tonight, we are not walking through a doorway yet. We are standing beneath the roof of the entire world. Because the 9 realms are not simply 9 islands scattered across a cosmic sea. They are 9 notes in one long song, and the instrument that holds them together is a tree so immense that calling it a tree feels almost like an insult. Yggdrasil is not a backdrop. It is the architecture of fate itself. Imagine a trunk wider than mountains, bark scarred by time that predates time, a living column that rises through the layers of reality. Its branches spread like rivers of green fire. Its roots claw deep into realms that even the gods treat with caution. In this world, the cosmos is not built of stone and stardust. It is grown, it is fed, it is wounded, it is healed. And like any living thing, it is never fully safe. The ancient poems tell us that creatures inhabit this colossal ash, as if the tree is not only a road, but a battlefield of quiet, ceaseless struggle. At its crown perches an eagle older than storms, a watcher whose gaze can turn distance into detail. Between its eyes sits a hawk, sharp as a blade of winter daylight. Along the trunk darts Ratatoska, the restless squirrel who carries insults and secrets up and down the bark, a small creature in the middle of grand wars, proving that even in myth the smallest tongues can sharpen the largest conflicts. Beneath the roots gnaws Nidhogg, the dragon or serpent who worries the wood with patient hunger. Not all destruction is dramatic. Some of it is slow. Some of it is a mouth in the dark that never tires. 4 stags browse among the branches, nibbling leaves that shimmer with cosmic importance, as if life itself must be eaten so life itself can continue. These details do not exist merely for decoration. They are metaphors with teeth. The Norse imagination did not believe that order was effortless. Even the world tree is under pressure. Even the world tree suffers. This is where the 9 realms begin, not as a travel itinerary, but as a living system of alliances, rivalries, and debts. When people say the names of the realms, they often picture 9 separate countries, but the older idea is stranger and richer. The realms are like families living in the same ancestral house, separated by doors and floors and old grudges, forced to share a fate no one can entirely escape. Asgard, where the Aesir rule with spear and wisdom and uneasy nobility. Vanaheim, home of the Vanir, whose power flows through fertility, sea winds, wealth and prophecy. Alfheim, bright with the subtle presence of the light elves. Midgard, the human world, ringed and defended, fragile and courageous. Jotunheim, the land of giants, where wilderness gains a voice and ancient forces refuse to kneel. Svartalfheim, the shadowed realm of makers and smiths, whose craft shapes the very tools of gods. Niflheim, cold and primal, where mist and deep waters remember the first days. Muspelheim, the blazing domain of fire, destruction, and unstoppable momentum. Helheim, the quiet kingdom of the dead, stern and inevitable as dusk. Tonight we are learning why they cannot be understood alone. The roots of Yggdrasil reach toward three great anchors of reality. One stretches to the realm of the gods, where the well of Erd lies beneath the care of the Norns. Another reaches toward the land of the giants, drawing from ancient depths that predate divine lore. A third sinks into the cold, dark reaches associated with Niflheim, near the roaring source of waters and serpents. The stories differ in detail across poem and prose, across region and era, but the shape of the truth remains steady. All life, even divine life, depends on what lies beneath. This is the Norse worldview in miniature. The future is not built only by what you want, it is built by what you owe. Near that sacred well in the realm of the gods, three figures sit at the edge of time. The Norns are not gentle fairies who exist to decorate destiny. They are the weavers of lore that even Odin treats with respect. Erd is what has happened. Verdandi is what is happening. Skuld is what must happen. Their names feel like a drumbeat of inevitability. The gods can fight, the gods can bargain, the gods can delay, but the final shape of things is already written into the grain of existence. This is why Norse mythology is so full of tension. It is not a story about immortals who always win. It is a story about powerful beings who know they are not above the ending. Odin, the Allfather, does not sit on his throne with the relaxed confidence of a ruler whose story will go on forever. He is a god of knowledge and of fear. He is a collector of truths that are painful to hold. His quest for wisdom is not a hobby, it is a survival strategy. He sacrifices an eye for a deeper sight. He hangs himself upon the world tree to seize the secrets of runes. He does not do these things because he is theatrical. He does them because the universe has teeth, and he intends to learn where they are before they bite. Even that act of hanging on Yggdrasil tells us what the tree truly is. It is not merely a plant. It is a threshold, a gallows, a ladder, a teacher. The 9 realms are the classrooms of this brutal, beautiful cosmology. You can sense that classroom even in the way Midgard is imagined. Humans are not placed at the center of the universe as its obvious purpose. They are placed in a defended enclosure made from the remains of a primordial giant, protected by gods who care for them and also need them. The world is not built for comfort, it is built for endurance. You can sense it in the giants, too. The Jotnar are often made into villains in later retellings, but the older pulse of the stories gives them a more complicated power. The giants are the raw forces of the wild, the stubborn truth that nature does not exist to flatter civilization. Storms, mountains, winter, the sea that swallows ships without apology, the deep time of stone and glacier. All of these can wear a giant's face in the imagination of a people who lived close to danger. The gods opposed the giants not only to be heroic, but to preserve a fragile line between a world that can be lived in and a world that cannot. But here is the secret that the myths keep whispering. The gods also need the giants. Without Jotunheim, Asgard loses its meaning. Without chaos, order becomes vanity. Without the wild, the civilized forgets why it exists. That is why Loki stands at the center of so many dangers. He is kin to giants and companion to gods, a walking contradiction with sharp laughter and sharper consequences. His stories prove that the border between realms is not a wall, it is a wound that can open. As we trace the 9 realms, we must remember this. The Norse cosmos is not clean. It is not moral in the simple sense. It is a world of competing necessities. The elves of Alfheim carry another kind of necessity. They are the glimmer of the unseen world, the idea that beauty and inspiration may be real forces, as vital as iron and oath. The light elves are not always described in detail, and that mystery is part of their power. The storytellers left room for the listener's imagination to supply the shimmer. To a farmer who watched the sun rise over snow and felt that sudden, blinding purity of light, it was easy to believe that there were beings made of that brightness. And the dwarfs, whether you place them under Svartalfheim or fold them into broader, shadowed regions of myth, represent the opposite but equally sacred art, craft, the ability to impose form on chaos. The hammer, the spear, the ring, the ship that folds like cloth, the golden boar bristling with enchantment. These treasures are not just magic toys, they are symbols of invention in a harsh world. When survival depends on tools, the maker becomes mythic. So even here, at the beginning, the 9 realms are already speaking to each other. The dead are listening too. Helheim is not yet our destination, but the weight of it rests on the story like a hand on a shoulder. Death in Norse thought is not one simple city with one simple gate. The heroic dead may go to Odin's hall. Others may be claimed by Freya. Many go to Hel, whose domain is neither purely evil nor purely merciful. It is simply the honest place where endings are kept. In a culture that knew the bitterness of winter and the suddenness of accident, a complex afterlife was a way of saying that life is not a single road for all. All of this is held in the branches and roots of Yggdrasil. And then there is Ragnarok. Even if you never speak the word aloud, you can feel it in the stories, the way you feel thunder long before rain. The 9 realms are not a static diagram. They are a narrative system aimed toward a future catastrophe that is also a future transformation. The world tree is living, but it is not unbreakable. The serpent gnaws, the dragon chews, the gossiping squirrel sows bitterness. The gods arm themselves, the giants wait. The end is not a surprise in these myths. The end is a promise. That may be the most haunting and most human gift of the Norse worldview. Fate is not there to comfort you. Fate is there to invite you to be brave anyway. So when a skald in a smoky hall recited these stories, the listeners were not merely entertained, they were being taught how to stand upright in a universe that did not guarantee their safety. They were being shown that courage and honor matter precisely because they do not always win. You can lose in the end and still be worthy. This is why the world tree matters so much. mythologies, heaven is above and the underworld is below, and the mortal world sits politely in between. The Norse picture is more organic. The realms are nested and entangled and connected by living roots. Stories of gods traveling between them are not just adventures, they are statements of cosmic politics. When Odin seeks wisdom from Mimir, when Thor crosses into giant lands to test strength and pride, when Freya's longing ties him to fated choices, these are not separate myths floating in isolation. They are the veins of one body. And the body is the tree. If you close your eyes, you can imagine the realms not as 9 dots on a map, but as 9 kinds of atmosphere. Asgard feels like polished stone under the weight of responsibility. Vanaheim feels like salt air and fertile earth and the soft menace of prophecy. Alfheim feels like morning light that almost speaks. Midgard feels like hearth, smoke and grit and the stubborn laughter of people who must survive. Jotunheim feels like wind over empty peaks and the deep dignity of things that cannot be tamed. Svartalfheim feels like hot metal and secret bargains struck under stone. Niflheim feels like breath freezing in your lungs. Muspelheim feels like a blade of heat that can erase a world. Helheim feels like the quiet after the last footstep. Each realm is a mood of existence. Each is necessary. In the coming chapters we will step into them one by one. We will meet the gods in their halls and the giants in their wild courts. We will listen for the elves in the light and for the dwarfs in the forge glow. We will trace the human ring of Midgard and feel how close the serpent lies beneath it. We will return to the primordial cold and the primordial fire to remember how the universe began. And we will eventually stand at the threshold of Helheim, where the stories grow softer, not because they are less important, but because death is a truth that does not need to shout. But for now we remain beneath Yggdrasil. The Norns continue their quiet work. The eagle watches, the dragon gnaws, the squirrel runs with its petty wars of words. The leaves tremble as if they can feel the future. And somewhere far above, in the high seat of a god who has sacrificed too much to pretend he is fearless, Odin listens to the wind in the branches and hears the shape of what is coming. If Yggdrasil is the spine of the cosmos, then Asgard is the high-held crown that insists the spine must stand straight. The realm of the Aesir rises with the confidence of a people who believe that order is not a luxury but a duty, and that chaos is never more than a season away from knocking at the gate. In the imagination of the North, Asgard is both fortress and promise. It is the place where law and warcraft are polished into sacred arts, where oaths are not mere words but iron bonds that can keep the sky from collapsing into the sea. You can picture it in the long firelit halls where the walls hold the echo of spears set in racks, where the floors shine with the patient care of servants who know their work is part of the dignity of gods. At the heart of this realm stands Valhalla, the hall raised for those who died with weapons in their grip, a place as much about preparing for the last battle as it is about honoring the dead. The chosen slain train and feast, devouring boar that returns renewed, drinking mead that seems to pour without end, living not in lazy indulgence, but in a rhythm that mirrors the eternal anxiety at the core of Asgard. Even paradise here has a schedule of readiness. Odin's presence in Asgard is like a storm that learned to think. He does not rule with the complacency of a monarch who expects history to kneel. He rules like a strategist who has glimpsed the last page of the story and is unwilling to accept it without a fight. His high seat, Lidskjalf, is less a throne of luxury than a watchtower of knowledge. From it he sees across the realms, not to satisfy curiosity, but to measure threats and opportunities like a gambler who knows that every coin on the table might be his last. The ravens that fly from him are not ornaments of Gothic charm. Hugin and Munin, thought and memory, are extensions of his hunger for information, for the kinds of truth that make rulers dangerous and lonely. And around him is a court that carries the weight of a divine state. Frigg, whose wisdom often lives in silence rather than spectacle, holds the household and the moral gravity of kingship. Heimdall stands as the sentinel of thresholds, hearing grass grow and wool move on sheep, the mythic expression of constant vigilance. And Thor, the thunder-bearer, is the hammer heart of Asgard's defense, a god whose strength is not merely personal but political, because every strike against the giants is a reassurance delivered to the fragile worlds beneath. Yet Asgard, for all its high towers and holy duties, is not the oldest shape of divine power. The Vanir of Vanaheim carry a different ancient authority, a kind of sovereignty that does not shine with the hard edge of a spear but with the deep, patient glow of fertile soil and rising tide. If Asgard feels like stone warmed by a disciplined flame, Vanaheim feels like rain that arrives exactly when the earth begins to crack. It is a realm that suggests abundance can be a form of power equal to conquest. The Vanir are gods of prosperity, fertility, the sea's generous cruelty and generous wealth, and the kind of prophecy that feels less like a shouted oracle and more like a quiet inevitability in the bones. Njord is tied to wind and trade and the shifting fortune of voyages. Freyr embodies growth and peace, the gentle face of power that can still command fear when insulted. Frasier is both love and war, tenderness and ferocity in a single, brilliant figure, a goddess who receives half the fallen, and thus stands as a rival answer to Odin's claim on heroic death. Vanaheim is not soft. It is simply built on a different logic, a different understanding of what keeps a world alive. The war between the Aesir and the Vanir lives in the myths like a scar that never became an ugliness, because it matured into a lesson. The stories speak of conflict triggered by distrust and wounded pride, of a clash between two divine families whose values overlapped yet refused to fully align. The Aesir represent governance forged through battle and law. The Vanir represent life's continuance, wealth, fertility, and the intimate diplomacy of nature's cycles. Neither side could entirely crush the other. That matters. The result was not annihilation but exchange, the kind of peace that proves even gods must accept compromise in a universe larger than their ambitions. Hostages were traded. Freyr and Freyja came to dwell among the Aesir, bringing with them a vivid reminder that prosperity is not a decorative blessing, but a strategic necessity. In return, figures tied to the Aesir crossed into the Vanir sphere, and in that mingling, the divine order of the North became a blended power rather than a single bloodline of authority. This is how the Norse imagination reconciled two sacred traditions, not by erasing one, but by weaving both into the strongest possible mythic fabric. Asgard's stories often unfold like political dramas shot through with thunder. You see that in the constant tension with Jotunheim, the realm of giants whose existence makes the walls of Asgard feel necessary. The mythic age is filled with episodes that read like high-stakes negotiations performed under the threat of violence. A giant builder offers to raise Asgard's fortifications, demanding the sun, the moon, and the hand of Freya as payment. The gods, confident in their cunning, accept under conditions they expect will save them from the cost. Loki's meddling collapses the giant's advantage at the last moment, and the payment is avoided by the kind of trickery that feels clever and shameful at once. This episode does more than entertain. It frames Asgard as a realm that survives not only through strength but through moral risk. The gods are defenders of order, yes, but they are also politicians who cheat when the survival of their world feels at stake. Their nobility is real, but it is not immaculate. Vanaheim's atmosphere, by contrast, suggests a quieter kind of might. It is tempting to imagine it as simply peaceful, but the Vanir are not naive gardeners. Their power is older than the battlefield and more subtle than the fortress. The sea gods of a trading people understand that wealth is a force that can reshape the world without ever lifting a sword. The fertility gods of a harsh climate know that the ability to promise harvest is the ability to promise survival. And survival is the first currency of loyalty. Freyr's later mythic choices, including the loss of his great sword in exchange for love, can be read as a tragic expression of Vanaheim's values colliding with the brutal demands of fate. Love and peace are not weak ideals, but in the Norse cosmos, they can carry terrible costs. The Vanir bring to the Aesir a reminder that a realm cannot be guarded by iron alone. It must also be fed. And so the two realms become twin pillars in a larger divine strategy. Asgard supplies the martial spine of the gods, the willingness to meet catastrophe head-on. Vanaheim supplies the lifeblood, the power to renew and enrich the world. The Aesir defend. This partnership is not always serene. There is rivalry in the background, the quiet friction of different instincts. Odin's hunger for knowledge can feel severe beside Freyja's mastery of cider, a magic of fate and transformation that some sources suggest Odin learned from her or from the Vanir tradition. The very fact that the chief god of the Aesir seeks wisdom from the Vanir suggests an important humility hidden beneath his severity. No single realm holds all truth. Even the highest throne must sometimes bow its head toward another kind of sacred power. The gold, bright image of Asgard, with its halls and bridges and feasting warriors, is made more poignant when you remember that the Aesir do not imagine themselves as untouchable. The prophecies of Ragnarok do not spare them. In a mythic universe where the end is known, every celebration becomes layered with meaning. The laughter in Valhalla is not the laughter of the careless. It is the laughter of those who understand the cost of being alive and choose joy as a form of defiance. The gods keep their dignity not by pretending the doom does not exist, but by building a culture of readiness. Thor's journeys to test giant strength and giant cunning are not random adventures. They are rehearsals for the last confrontation. Heimdall's watch is not ceremonial. It is practical. Odin's endless collecting of lore is the desperate paperwork of a ruler who knows that ignorance is a death sentence. Vanaheim faces its own shadow of fate. The Vanir, tied to growth and abundance, carry an especially painful awareness of winter's authority. When harvest fails, when the sea turns cruel, when peace collapses into blood feud, the values of Vanaheim are tested by the same hard world that forged Asgard's steel heart. This is why the union of the two divine families matters beyond mythic genealogy. It offers a worldview in which survival requires both the sword and the seed, both the wall and the well, both the warrior's discipline and the healer's patience. To a people who lived where the year could turn lethal in a single storm, this balance would have felt not theoretical but urgent. In the glow of these two realms, you can begin to see how the 9 realms will unfold as a story of interdependence. The gods are not solitary rulers of isolated kingdoms. They are participants in a cosmic network of obligations. Asgard cannot endure without the fertility and wealth currents represented by Vanaheim. Vanaheim cannot remain secure without the martial shield that Asgard offers against the oldest threats. And both realms must contend with the wider world tree, with the giants who will test their borders, with the elves and dwarfs whose gifts and secrets will alter the balance of power, with the primordial forces that birthed existence and will one day rise again to challenge it. So, imagine the sky above Asgard at evening, not as a simple backdrop of stars, but as a ceiling of responsibility. Torches burn along the walls. The great hall doors open and close with the rhythm of a living state. Somewhere inside, a council of gods argues over a choice that will ripple outward into Midgard and beyond. Now imagine, at that same hour, the winds of Vanaheim moving through sacred groves and shorelines, carrying the scent of salt and fertile earth, while a goddess of prophecy quietly weighs the currents of fate. 2 realms breathing in different tempos, yet bound to the same tree, the same future, the same unspoken promise that they will stand together when the final storm arrives. After the stern heights of Asgard and the fertile mysteries of Vanaheim, the world tree leads us into territories that feel less like kingdoms of law and more like states of being. If the Aesir and Vanir are the great ruling families of the divine, then the elves and dwarfs are the artisans of the cosmic mood, the unseen hands shaping the shimmer of wonder and the hard edge of survival. The Norse imagination treated these peoples with a kind of reverent uncertainty. They were never only neighbors of the gods. They were the hidden pulse beneath reality, the reason the air might feel enchanted at sunrise, or the reason a simple object might change the fate of realms. The stories do not always agree on borders and definitions, and that disagreement is part of their charm. It reminds us that these myths were once living things carried by many tongues, shaped by many fires, and that the difference between a light elf and a dark elf could be as fluid as the difference between dusk and midnight. Alfheim comes to us like an early morning that has not yet decided whether it is gentle or blinding. The sources speak of Yozalfar, the light elves, as beings of beauty who dwell in a realm that sounds cleaner and brighter than the worlds of men and giants. Their presence is often described with an economy of detail that makes them more haunting. The less you are told, the more you imagine. In a landscape of long winters and brief summers, light itself becomes sacred, and so a people made of light feels like a cultural prayer given a face. There is a verse tradition in which Alfheim is linked to Freya, the Vanir god of prosperity and growth, who is said to have received it as a tooth gift, a ritual of honor marking early life and divine promise. That detail is small but revealing. It binds the realm of shimmering beings to the god who governs fertile abundance, suggesting that Alfheim is not only pretty but essential, a metaphysical springtime that supports the wider balance of the world. To imagine Alfheim properly, you almost need to think in the language of weather rather than architecture. This is not an easy fortress like Asgard, nor a domain of sea winds and sacred groves like Vanaheim. This is the realm where beauty is a force, where radiance itself can be a kind of intelligence. It is tempting in modern retellings to soften the elves into harmless fair folk, but the ancient North rarely granted innocence without teeth. Light can heal, but it can also expose. It can bless, but it can also burn the eyes that look too long. The light elves, in this sense, may represent the holy edge of the unseen world, that strange feeling that some places in nature are not merely scenic but watched. The elder imagination understood that the world is filled with presences that do not always announce themselves. This is where the elves become more than decorative mythology. They serve as a bridge between the tangible and the mysterious. To live in the Norse world was to live close to forests, to mountains, to sea fog rolling without warning, to sudden shifts of season that could turn a confident voyage into a funeral. The belief in elves, whether luminous or shadowed, was a way of giving narrative shape to the feeling that life is influenced by powers you cannot always bargain with. You do your best, you speak your oaths, you set your tools in order, yet there may still be a breath of otherworldly whim that changes the outcome. Alfheim stands for that shining uncertainty. But the world tree does not allow us to linger in light without also teaching us what light depends on. The path bends downward into Svartalfheim, a realm whose name conjures darkness, hidden work, and the kind of genius that grows best when shielded from the Sunday. Here the stories become more complex, because Norse texts and later interpretations sometimes blur the line between dark elves and dwarfs. Some traditions speak of Svartalfar, others speak of Dvergar. Sometimes these labels overlap, sometimes they seem distinct. If Alfheim represents luminous otherness, Svartalfheim represents secret craft, the workshop of the cosmos where beauty is not a given gift of nature, but a hard-won achievement hammered into shape. In this realm, creation is not a soft miracle. It is labor. It is a hot breath over metal. It is the ringing sound of a hammer that does not stop until dawn has become a rumor. The dwarfs, whether one places them firmly in Svartalfheim or treats them as a broader subterranean people, are the master smiths of myth. They embody the sacred importance of making in a culture that depended on skilled hands. A good blade, a sturdy ship fitting, a finely balanced tool could mean the difference between feeding your family and watching winter eat your hopes. The dwarfs take that reality and elevate it to cosmic scale. They make objects that even gods need to survive. The most famous of these stories begins with a petty cruelty that becomes a mythic turning point. Loki, always the restless spark in the dry grass of divine order, cuts the golden hair of Sif while she sleeps. Sif is Thor's wife, and her hair is not merely personal beauty but symbolic abundance, a golden field at harvest time. By maiming her, Loki injures not only a woman's dignity but a cultural image of prosperity itself. When Thor discovers the act, his anger is swift and terrifying. The thunder god is not a complicated poet of wrath. He is justice delivered like a storm. Loki, faced with the possibility of being torn apart, makes a promise that reveals both his cunning and his instinct for survival. He will go to the master smiths and return with treasures so great that even Thor's fury might be redirected into awe. So Loki descends into the realm of craft and bargains with the sons of Ivaldi, who forge wonders that read like a list of impossible solutions to divine problems. They craft new hair for Sif, spun of gold, that will grow like natural hair when placed upon her head. They create Odin's spear Gungnir, a weapon that never misses, an image of authority made tangible. They forge Freyr's ship Skidbladnir, which can be folded and carried, yet is strong enough to cross any sea with favorable winds. The scale of these gifts is not accidental. Hair, spear, ship, beauty restored, authority sharpened, travel mastered. In 3 objects, the dwarfs answer 3 cosmic needs. But Loki's nature does not allow him to stop at one successful bargain. He wagers his own head with another pair of smiths, Brokkr and Sindri, provoking a second round of creation that becomes a contest between pride and perfection. The story of their forging is a mythic lesson about the fragility of excellence. As they work, Loki transforms himself into a biting fly to sabotage the process, stinging the smiths to disrupt their concentration. Yet even with interference, the dwarfs produce treasures that define the age of gods. They forge the boar Gullinbursti with bristles of light, a creature of speed and radiant power for Freyr. They create the ring Draupnir for Odin, from which new rings drip in steady rhythm, an image of wealth and generative magic. And then they craft Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, the most iconic weapon of Norse myth, a tool of protection and holy violence. The hammer's handle is short, a flaw attributed to Loki's interference, but the short handle becomes part of the object's character rather than a weakness that diminishes it. The Norse imagination is honest about imperfection. Even legendary objects may bear the mark of conflict. These tales do more than entertain. They show that the gods are not self-sufficient. They require the labor of other beings. The elegance of Asgard depends on the heat of hidden forges. Even Odin's authority is partly a gift of subterranean hands. This is a profound idea in a world where kings relied on smiths and warriors relied on craftsmen. The myth mirrors the social truth. Power without tools is a story that cannot survive contact with winter. Svartalfheim, then, becomes a realm where creation and danger are inseparable. To make something powerful is to invite envy, conflict, and unintended consequences. Consider also the forging of Gleipnir, the magical fetter that binds the wolf Fenrir. This binding is not achieved through brute iron but through paradox and subtlety. The fetter is made from impossible ingredients: the sound of a cat's footsteps, the beard of a woman, the roots of a mountain, the breath of a fish, the sinews of a bear, the spittle of a bird. Whether the list varies in retellings, the meaning remains sharp. The dwarfs can craft with the logic of dream and riddle, shaping reality with constraints that feel like poetry turned into law. The gods themselves rely on this delicate craft to delay catastrophe. Fenrir is not merely a beast, he is a promise of Ragnarok. Binding him is an act of temporary survival. The dwarfs give the gods time. And time, in Norse myth, is a currency more precious than gold. Now place Alfheim and Svartalfheim side by side in your mind, and you begin to see the deeper architecture of the 9 realms. The Norse cosmos does not simply alternate between good and evil. It alternates between visible and hidden, between the beauty that appears effortless and the beauty that must be built through sacrifice. Alfheim is light as gift, Svartalfheim is light as product. One realm suggests grace, the other suggests the price of grace. It is also worth remembering that these beings were likely not distant abstractions to the people who told these tales. Folklore in later Scandinavian tradition carries long echoes of elf belief, of hidden people who might bless a field or ruin it, who might be honored with respect or offended by carelessness. While the medieval texts give us the mythic outlines, the older cultural atmosphere likely included a daily sense of cohabitation with the unseen. The world was not considered empty of spirit. It was densely populated by powers, some grand enough to be named as gods, others subtle enough to be felt only as a shift in luck or mood. Alfheim and Svartalfheim are the mythic homes of that intuition. As we move through this chapter's mood, we can also sense how these realms tie into the larger tensions of the cosmos. The tools forged in shadow will later answer the threats rising in Jotunheim and the chaos coiling around Midgard. The brightness of Alfheim will stand as a fragile counterweight to the cold depths of Niflheim and the consuming inferno of Muspelheim. The 9 realms are a system. If one is misunderstood, the entire balance grows blurry. Imagine an evening in Asgard, long before the final war, when the gods are gathered with a rare moment of calm. Thor's hammer rests within reach, because it always must. Freyr's boar gleams with an inner light that refuses darkness. Odin turns a ring in his hand and contemplates the meaning of abundance in a world where endings are foretold. These objects are not just possessions. They are diplomatic agreements between realms, proof that even the highest gods must treat the hidden makers with respect. Somewhere far below, in the deep chambers of Svartalfheim, a smith wipes sweat from his brow and knows that his work has altered the course of the world tree's story. Somewhere in Alfheim, a light elf watches the dawn spill across a horizon that has never known human footprints, and the mere existence of that beauty offers a quiet defiance against the weight of doom. There is a tenderness in that contrast. The Norse myths can be brutal, but they are not cynical. They allow for wonder without pretending that wonder is free. So this chapter leaves us with 2 realms that feel like a pair of hands, one open and luminous, offering the gift of enchantment, the other calloused and patient, forging the tools that make enchantment durable. The light of Alfheim and the shadowed heat of Svartalfheim are not enemies. They are collaborators in the long survival of meaning, and as the world tree continues to shiver under the pressure of prophecy, it is these realms that remind us that beauty can be both a comfort and a weapon, and that the unseen workers of the cosmos may hold as much power over destiny as the gods who sit in high halls. If Asgard is the high seat of duty, and Vanaheim the deep pulse of abundance, if Alfheim shimmers with the holiness of light, and Svartalfheim breathes with the heat of craft, then Midgard is where all those distant powers become personal. It is where mythology stops being a map of wonders and becomes the texture of a life lived under changing skies. The name itself carries the shape of the idea, the middle enclosure, the guarded space, the ringed world where humans are allowed to exist between forces that are older, larger, and far less forgiving than any king you might meet in a hall. Midgard is not glamorous in the way the divine realms can be. It is sacred because it is vulnerable. It is a hearth surrounded by night. It is a fence built not out of arrogance but out of necessity. The old stories tell us that the gods fashioned this human world from the body of Ymir, raising the oceans from his blood, shaping mountains from his bones, and building a protective boundary out of his eyebrows to keep the giants at bay. That image is both brutal and oddly tender. The gods did not create humanity an open field with no border. They created a space that acknowledges danger as the permanent neighbor of life. In this mythic imagination, safety is not a natural right. It is a labor that must be renewed. The people who first told these tales knew exactly what that meant. Life in the North was not an abstract struggle for philosophical dignity. It was winter stores measured in handfuls. It was ships that might return heavy with trade or not return at all. It was farms that could flourish one year and starve the next. Against that reality, the idea of Midgard becomes not only cosmic geography, but a moral lesson. Humans are not the masters of the universe. They are the brave inhabitants of a small defended ring, and their courage is not a heroic costume worn for applause, but a daily posture. You can feel this in the way the myths treat human kings and heroes. They are not elevated to challenge the gods as equals. They are celebrated because they stand upright in storms the gods themselves respect. The Norse worldview is often described as bleak, but that is too simple. It does not promise comfort, it promises meaning. And meaning here is born from endurance. That endurance has a serpent-shaped shadow. Far out in the encircling sea that defines Midgard's boundary lies Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent, a child of Loki and the giantess Angrboda, a creature so vast that it can wrap itself around the world and bite its own tail. This is not just a monster placed there for dramatic terror, it is the embodiment of cosmic containment. The serpent's very posture suggests a world held in a tense balance. It is both border and threat. It keeps the ocean's edge defined, and at the same time it guarantees that the edge is never safe. The idea that humanity lives inside a ring that is literally encircled by a creature of apocalyptic destiny is a mythic way of saying that the greatest dangers are not always far away. Sometimes they are the walls you trust. Sometimes the line of safety is also the line of catastrophe waiting for permission to unfold. Thor's relationship with the serpent becomes one of the most potent symbols of this truth. The thunder god is the great defender of Midgard, the one who slams his hammer against the giants and stands as the muscular reassurance that Asgard has not forgotten the human realm. Yet even Thor cannot erase the serpent. He can only confront it. Their famous encounter at sea, when Thor is said to have fished for Jormungandr using an ox head as bait, reveals a particular Norse taste for audacity. The god pulls the serpent toward the surface, and for a moment the boundary between everyday survival and cosmic horror collapses into one unforgettable scene. Different versions of the tale emphasize different outcomes, but the emotional truth is consistent. Thor is brave enough to challenge a doom that the world itself rests upon. The story does not require a clean victory to accomplish its purpose. It requires the image of defiance. Midgard is also where the giants are not distant abstractions but imminent pressures. In Asgard, a giant may be a political rival and an existential conceptual threat. In Midgard, the giants become the harshness of the weather, the unpredictable sea, the avalanche and the hunger, the shadow of wilderness pressing against the fence line. The Norse imagination collapses these realities into mythic figures, not because people were naive about nature, but because personifying a threat can make it speakable. And if a threat can be spoken, it can be met with ritual, story, and courage. This is why you can sense a long cultural line between ancient myth and later folk beliefs about trolls and hidden beings. The world was alive with presences. Midgard was the arena where humans had to negotiate with that liveliness. Within this arena, the gods are not remote. They cast their influence into the human sphere through seasons and social ideals. Odin is associated with kingship, wisdom, poetry, and the dangerous glamour of war. His presence can be felt in the way rulers sought legitimacy not only through strength but through a reputation for cunning and a connection to the sacred. Freya and Freya, with their Vanir roots, echo the importance of fertility and prosperity. They represent the necessary softness that must exist inside a hard world. Thor, more than any other god, seems to belong to the rhythm of Midgard's daily hopes. Farmers and ordinary people could imagine him as a protector not only because he was strong, but because his strength was directed outward, toward the forces that threatened the human ring. His myths are often earthy in tone compared to Odin's haunted grandeur. He eats, he travels, he is tricked, he rages, he laughs. He feels like a god who understands the materiality of survival. The structure of Midgard itself mirrors the structure of human society. There is the home, the hall, the kin group, the oath. There are laws, not always written, but embedded in memory and enforced by reputation. The Norse world valued honor, not merely as personal vanity but as social glue. In a place where centralized power could be distant and where communities relied on mutual defense and shared norms, your name mattered. The myths reinforce this worldview by showing that even gods are bound by the consequences of oath and insult. When you hear about feasts in Asgard and vows made over mead, you are seeing a divine reflection of the human social order. Midgard is not a forgotten lower tier. It is a crucial cog in the cosmic machine. There is another layer to Midgard's meaning that grows clearer when we consider fate. The Norns weave destiny for gods and men alike. The presence of fate in Norse myth does not crush human agency, it reframes it. The point is not whether you can avoid the end. The point is whether you can meet it with dignity. This idea becomes especially powerful when applied to human life, where mortality is not a distant prophecy but an everyday certainty. The Norse stories grant humans a special kind of nobility precisely because they are not immortal. A warrior's bravery is impressive not because he is likely to win, but because he may die. A farmer's perseverance is admirable not because the harvest is guaranteed, but because it never is. In Midgard, the philosophy of the entire Norse cosmos finds its most intimate expression. It is also in Midgard that we feel the complicated legacy of Loki most sharply. As a figure who belongs to both the gods and the giants, Loki functions like a crack in reality through which chaos can enter polite order. His actions often spill into Midgard's welfare. His children become threats that define the boundaries of the human world. The serpent encircles the sea. The wolf Fenrir becomes the coming terror of the last battle. Hel rules the quiet realm of the dead. This is a family tree of consequences. The presence of these figures in the ecosystem of Midgard reinforces the sense that human life is entangled with the moral and political drama of the gods. The old storytellers did not place humanity outside the cosmic story. They placed humanity inside it as the realm for which much of the cosmic struggle matters. Consider the feeling of a Norse night in a small coastal settlement. The wind is impatient. The dark is thick, the sea has its own mood, and that mood is never obligated to be kind. In such a setting, the idea that a thunder god battles beings of frost and mountain is not distant fantasy. It is a spiritual reassurance. The stories are a way of saying that human fear has an ally larger than itself. They are also a way of reminding humans that they must match that divine bravery with their own. If Thor can raise his hammer against the incomprehensible, then a human can raise a shield against a raider, or a plough against a stubborn field, or a song against despair. Midgard's cultural importance is also tied to the notion of world order. The gods built it as a place of balance between wildness and structure. The giants represent the raw primeval forces that do not care about human priorities. Midgard represents the fragile space where human priorities can exist at all. It is a philosophical statement with the shape of geography. It is also a story of separation. The boundary between Midgard and the outer chaos is not only guarded by gods but encoded in the very fabric of the world. The ocean ring, the serpent, the walls of the world made from a giant's body, all of it implies a message that a human settlement is successful not because it pretends wilderness is harmless, but because it respects the wilderness enough to build strong fences and stronger communities. As we move forward in this story, it will become clear that Midgard is not only defended by the gods, Midgard defends the gods in its own way. The memory of humans, the prayers, the stories, the rituals, all of these keep the divine world alive in culture. A myth is not only a story about gods, it is a relationship between the storyteller and the sacred. In that sense, Midgard is the realm of meaning-making. It is where the cosmic drama becomes human identity. When a skald recited a tale of Thor's journeys, he was not only entertaining his audience, he was reinforcing a worldview in which courage was the greatest virtue a small world could cultivate. You can also sense Midgard's role as the emotional hinge of the 9 realms. The other realms are grand, strange, elemental, or hidden. Midgard is familiar. It is the realm where you can smell cooking fires and hear the creak of a ship's plank and feel the weight of a child asleep in the next room while the storm tests your roof. This familiarity is precisely why Midgard makes the cosmic story feel real. Without it, the myth would be too distant. With it, the myth becomes personal. You care about Asgard's fate because Asgard's fall would mean the collapse of the shield over the human ring. You care about the Vanir because their prosperity is echoed in the harvest fields of Midgard. You care about the dwarfs because their forged wonders protect the fragile center. You care about the giants because their hunger is the hunger of the blizzard that can erase a village. You care about Helheim because even the bravest human in Midgard will eventually walk toward an ending that cannot be bargained away. It is not an accident that the last battle of the world, when it comes in prophecy, is depicted as a catastrophe that overwhelms Midgard's seas and skies. The serpent unleashes poison. The wolf devours what it can. Fire advances from the south. The human realm trembles. This is not only the apocalypse of the gods, it is the apocalypse of the hearth. The Norse imagination makes the end of the world feel like an intimate catastrophe because the world is understood as a home worth defending. Ragnarok is not only doom, it is a declaration that what is threatened was precious. So we leave Midgard in this chapter with the taste of salt air and smoke, with the sense that humanity exists in a courageous middle space, not the center of the universe by entitlement, but the center of the narrative by emotional truth. The gods might be grander, the giants might be older, the elves might be more luminous, and the dwarfs might shape miracles in the dark, but it is the human ring that gives the cosmic struggle its beating heart. The world tree holds many realms, but Midgard is where the listener's breath naturally belongs. After Midgard with its guarded hearths and ringed seas, the world tree draws our gaze outward and upward into a realm that does not apologize for its vastness. Jotunheim is often spoken of as if it were simply the enemy country of the gods, the place where monsters brood and winter sharpens its knives. But the older pulse of the stories paints something richer and more unsettling. This is not a realm of mindless brutality. It is a realm of ancient intelligence, of forces that existed before divine order felt confident enough to name itself. Jotunheim is wilderness given a voice, a memory of a world that did not ask permission to be dangerous. When the Aesir built Midgard's borders, when they raised Asgard's walls and promised to defend the fragile center, they were also admitting that beyond the fence line stood something too old and too immense to be domesticated. The giants are not simply villains in this cosmology. They are the necessary counterweight to the gods, the raw gravity that keeps divine pride from floating into nonsense. If Asgard is the will to rule and protect, then Jotunheim is the reminder that rule is always provisional, that protection is always a battle against an older truth. It is important to remember that the giants are woven into the very origin of the world. The first shaping of order comes from the body of Ymir, that primordial giant whose death becomes the material of creation. Oceans are born from blood, mountains from bones, the sky from skull, a mythic anatomy that declares a stark principle. The civilized world is built from the defeated wild, yet the wild is never truly erased. It becomes the foundation of everything the gods claim to govern. This is why the relationship between gods and giants is so charged with paradox. The Aesir must fight the giants to preserve the world, yet the world itself is made from giant flesh. The gods must insist on their superiority, yet their own ancestry is tangled in giant bloodlines. Even Odin, that stern collector of wisdom, descends from a lineage that does not stand entirely separate from the forces he opposes. In this way, Jotunheim is not merely a distant threat. It is a living relative, the uncomfortable family truth that cannot be disowned. When we imagine Jotunheim, we should not picture a single city of evil, but a landscape of moods. This is the realm of high mountains and deep valleys, of stone that seems to remember its own formation, of rivers that run with a colder purpose than those in Midgard. It is easy to see how such a place would grow into myth among people who lived close to sea cliffs, glaciers, storm-battered coastlines, and forests where you could walk for days and never see another fire. The giants make the natural world intelligible in narrative form. A blizzard that arrives like a conqueror, a mountain that refuses roads, a sea that swallows the fearless and the foolish alike. All of these can be given faces and names in Jotunheim. The Norse imagination did not invent giants because it was ignorant of nature. It invented giants because it understood nature so well that it made sense to grant it personality. Thor's journeys into Jotunheim are among the most revealing stories in the entire mythic cycle. He is the god most visibly committed to defending the human ring, the hammer arm of Asgard. the thunderous promise that chaos will not cross the border without paying a price. Yet when Thor steps into giant lands, the stories often shift in tone. He is still powerful, still explosive in his righteousness, but he is also tested in ways that expose the limits of brute strength. The famous tale of his visit to Utgard is a masterpiece of mythic humiliation that carries a deeper lesson. There he encounters illusions disguised as contests. He is asked to drink from a horn that seems ordinary, yet the horn is connected to the sea itself, and despite his staggering effort, he cannot empty it. He is asked to lift a cat, only to discover that the cat is in truth the Midgard serpent in disguise, a cosmic boundary compressed into a household trick. He is asked to wrestle an old woman and finds himself defeated, because she is not merely old age but old age itself, the force no strength can overthrow. The giants in this story do not win by matching Thor's power. They win by revealing that power is not the only language of reality. The lesson is almost philosophical. Even the protector of Midgard must accept that some truths cannot be hammered into submission. This is where Jotunheim becomes the realm of cunning and perspective. The giants possess not just great size but great context. They often understand the hidden rules of the cosmos better than the gods want to admit. They can be crude, certainly, and violent when insulted, but they can also be witty, strategic, and terrifyingly perceptive. The gods enter Jotunheim as conquerors in spirit, yet they sometimes leave with bruised pride and deeper knowledge. In a culture that valued wisdom as a weapon, this would have felt like a meaningful warning. Do not assume your strength makes you correct. Do not assume your victory makes you wise. Jotunheim also produces some of the most haunting figures in Norse myth. Giants whose stories are not simple adversarial sketches but complex portraits of desire, honor, and grief. Consider Skadi, daughter of the giant Thiazi. After her father is killed by the gods, she travels to Asgard armed and furious, demanding compensation. The scene is remarkable because it shows a giant negotiating with gods on legal and cultural terms rather than on pure violence. Skadi demands a settlement, and the gods respond with a mixture of diplomacy and cleverness. She is offered the chance to choose a husband from among the gods, but only by looking at their feet. She chooses Njord, drawn to the beauty of what she hopes are Balder's feet, only to find herself paired with the sea god instead. Their marriage is an uneasy blend of longing and incompatibility, a mythic expression of two realms that cannot fully share a home. Skadi loves the high cold of mountains, Njord loves the salt air of the coast. They attempt to divide their lives between these landscapes, but the arrangement does not resolve the deeper truth. Some differences are not insults, they are identities. Skadi becomes in many retellings a goddess of winter, hunting, and independence, a giantess whose story crosses into divinity and reminds us again that the borders between realms are less like walls and more like living wounds. Then there is the story of Thrym, the giant who steals Mjolnir and demands Freyja as his bride in exchange for returning it. The gods, desperate without the hammer that protects them from giant incursions, devise a plan that is both comic and revealing. Thor must disguise himself as Freyja and travel to Jotunheim to reclaim his weapon. The tale plays with humor, but beneath the laughter lies a sharp truth. Without their sacred tools, the gods are vulnerable. The giants understand leverage. They do not always seek open war. Sometimes they seek ransom, humiliation, and the symbolic conquest of divine dignity. When Thor recovers Mjolnir and slays Thrym and his household, The story reads like a violent restoration of the cosmic balance. The gods cannot allow the giants to believe that trickery alone can overturn the order of the worlds. The hammer returns not only to Thor's hand but to its role as a cornerstone of the treaty between civilization and chaos. Other tales push the rivalry into more brutal arenas. Hrungnir, one of the strongest of the giants, is drawn into conflict with Thor in a story where pride becomes the fuse of catastrophe. The giant boasts, threatens to lift Valhalla and Asgard itself, and the gods are forced to respond. The duel that follows is mythic theatre of the highest order. Hrungnir's heart is said to be stone, his head a massive whetstone, imagery that suggests a being made of unyielding nature and deadly sharpness. When Thor hurls his hammer and Hrungnir throws his whetstone, the stones collide. The whetstone shatters, and fragments lodge in Thor's skull, a small detail that humanizes the thunder god by marking him with lasting consequence. Even victory carries injury. Even the greatest defender is not untouched by conflict with the old wild powers. And what of Loki, that restless hinge between worlds? His connections to Jotunheim are not incidental. They are essential to understanding why the giants can never be fully cast as meaningless villains. Loki's father is the giant Farbauti. His mother is often named Laufey. His children with Angrboda are the great threats of later prophecy. Through Loki, Jotunheim's bloodline flows directly into the heart of Asgard's fate. He is the living proof that the boundary between order and chaos is permeable. The gods tolerate him because he is useful, clever, and at times genuinely indispensable. Yet they fear him because the wild in him cannot be permanently sworn into obedience. When the stories move toward Ragnarok, Loki's divided nature becomes a declaration that the cosmos cannot fully suppress its own shadow. We might say that Jotunheim is the realm that keeps the gods honest, but even that phrasing is too neat. The giants are not moral police. They are primal claims on existence. The cold demands respect. The heights demand humility. The wild demands that the fence be strong. The mythic relationship between Asgard and Jotunheim is a dramatization of what it feels like to live near a world that can destroy you without hatred. A giant does not need to be evil to be deadly. A storm does not need to be wicked to be final. The Norse genius was to build a narrative that acknowledges this truth without surrendering to despair. The gods can be outwitted, but they can also adapt. The giants can threaten, but they can also be negotiated with. The cosmos remains dangerous, but it remains intelligible through story. This is also why Jotunheim is often a realm of knowledge as much as it is a realm of threat. The gods seek wisdom from giant sources. Mimir, associated with deep memory and counsel, lives in a place of ancient power. The prophetic giantess in the Cirrus tradition speaks truths that shape the mythology's grand arc. These voices from the giant world are not marginal. They are central. The gods do not own all insight. They borrow it, steal it, earn it. Jotunheim becomes the library of the raw world, the place where truth predates politeness. When Odin seeks knowledge of fate, part of what he is doing is admitting that the universe is not a kingdom with one capital. It is a wilderness threaded with competing authorities. So as we walk in imagination through this realm, we can feel how its presence explains the whole architecture of the 9 realms. Midgard needs its boundaries because Jotunheim exists. Asgard needs its hammer arm because giant pressure is constant. Vanaheim's emphasis on fertility and prosperity takes on deeper meaning when you remember that winter can be imagined as a giant's breath. Alfheim's light becomes more precious when you consider the dark stone vastness of giant lands. Svartalfheim's craft becomes more urgent because the enemies of the gods do not sleep. Even the primordial realms we have not yet visited in full detail, the cold of Niflheim and the fire of Muspelheim, feel like distant relatives of Jotunheim's elemental mood. And still, Jotunheim is not only a realm of antagonists. There is a certain austere dignity in the way the giants are allowed to be magnificent. Some are foolish, some are cruel, some are wise, some are tragic. They are as varied as the gods, which is precisely why they feel real in mythic terms. The Norse storytellers did not fear complexity. They understood that a great enemy is rarely a simple one. The more fully you imagine the rival, the more meaningful your defense becomes. When we finally turn our eyes toward the last battle in later chapters, the giants will appear not as an unexpected invasion but as an inevitable uprising of ancient forces that have always been present. The gods have delayed this reckoning through strength, alliances, magic, and cunning, but they have never been able to erase the truth that Jotunheim represents. Nature cannot be permanently conquered. The wild cannot be entirely civilized. The storm cannot be told it is unwelcome. The Aesir can only hold the line long enough for meaning to be made inside the human ring. So we leave Jotunheim not with a clean moral verdict, but with a richer sense of the world tree's balance. The giants are the old, wild intelligence of existence, the necessary darkness that gives shape to light, the adversarial kin who keep the gods from believing their own propaganda. In the pressure between Asgard and Jotunheim, the mythic universe takes its sharpest breath. It is a breath full of frost and pride and ancient laughter, a breath that carries the promise that the next chapters will draw us deeper into the elemental foundations that even giants must respect, and that even gods cannot ignore. After the restless grandeur of Jotunheim, where the old wild intelligence of the giants presses its weight against the gods' proud architecture, the world tree guides us towards something even older than rivalry. This is not a chapter of courts and bargains, not a chapter of feasts, weapons, or shifting loyalties. This is a chapter of first principles, the kind of mythic physics that the North imagined beneath every storm and every harvest. Niflheim and Muspelheim are not merely two more realms on a list. They are the parents of the entire story, the elemental extremes whose collision makes everything else possible. If Asgard is duty, and Midgard is endurance, if Alfheim is radiance, and Svartalfheim is craft, then Niflheim and Muspelheim are the raw syllables from which all the later sentences are formed. To enter them is to step out of familiar narrative time and into the deep mythic memory of the cosmos, where history is not measured in years but in elemental moods that have never truly stopped breathing. Niflheim comes first in the imagination of chill, not as a simple place of snow that might melt with spring, but as an ancient north whose cold is woven into the bones of existence. The name itself carries a sound of fog and hush, a place where mist is not a weather event but a law. The old sources connect Niflheim to Hivagelmir, the roaring wellspring from which rivers flow, a paradoxical image that joins water and cold and motion into one primal engine. From this deep source run the Ilivagar, the ice-cold rivers that creep outward into the void, carrying rhyme and threat and the blunt certainty that not all movement is warm and life-giving. It is easy to understand how such ideas grew from a landscape where winter could feel like an invading army, where fog could erase a coastline, where ice could appear overnight and make roads into traps. The myth does not merely describe cold, it honors cold as a power that existed before the gods declared ownership over the world. Niflheim is not a remote corner, it is an original condition. Muspelheim is the answer to that condition, not as a gentle complement but as a roaring counterforce. This is the realm of heat, so pure it feels like intent, of fire that does not merely warm but devours structure and mocks permanence. Muspelheim is imagined as a southern blaze, a domain of fire giants and the terrifying authority of Surt, whose sword shines with a brightness that can set worlds alight. In later prophecy, Surt is not a minor figure who arrives late to the story. He is the embodiment of the final ruin that was always present in the universe's beginning. When people today picture Muspelheim, they often imagine a fantasy wasteland of lava fields and flame. The older mythic pulse is more existential. Muspelheim is the truth that destruction is not an accident. It is a foundational ingredient of reality. Fire is not only a tool for cooking and comfort, it is also the hungry principle that turns forests to ash and reminds every living thing that endurance has a limit. Between these two ancestral realms stretched Ginnunga Gap, the yawning void that waited like a dark breath held in the throat of eternity. The Norse stories do something clever and haunting with this emptiness. They do not treat it as a sterile nothing. They treat it as a stage ready for the first drama of existence. When the frost of Niflheim drifted outward and the sparks of Muspelheim rose and found it, the void became active, the ice began to melt, the melt became life. This is a cosmology that insists creation is not the result of calm agreement. It is the product of tension and collision. The universe is born from clash, which means that the universe will always remember clash in its bloodstream. Out of that first steaming mingling came Ymir, the primordial giant whose presence is both a marvel and a warning. He emerges not as a crafted child of benevolent gods, but as a natural consequence of the elements meeting. He is existence before ethics, size before order, flesh before law. The old story does not linger on his personality because his role is more foundational than personal. He is the first shape of life drawn out of the elements, and from him the line of giants multiplies, a reminder that the wild world that later threatens the gods is not a late complication. It is the original inheritance of creation. Alongside Ymir appears Audhumla, the cow whose milk nourishes him, an image that feels almost tender in the middle of primal violence. Yet Audhumla is also a creative force. As she licks salty ice, she reveals Buri, ancestor of the gods. In this strange sequence, life is born out of cold and fire, but dynasties are born out of nourishment and patience. The myth is rich with contradiction. The first living beings are both brutal and sustaining, both chaotic and necessary. From Buri comes Bor, and from Bor come Odin, Vili, and Ve, the first great architects of the ordered world. Their decision to slay Ymir and shape the cosmos from his body is one of the most revealing acts in all Norse myth. It is not only a story of victory, it is a story of transformation through violence. Oceans are made from blood, earth from flesh, mountains from bone, clouds from brain, and the sky from skull. The world is not conjured from nothing. It is built from what had to be overcome. This is not a mindset that flatters comfort. It is a mindset that reflects how a harsh environment teaches the psychology of survival. You do not survive by wishing the old threats away. You survive by mastering them, reshaping them, and building your home out of the very material that once endangered your life. Niflheim and Muspelheim therefore remain present long after this creation, not as forgotten grandparents but as active forces. The cold does not retire because Midgard has hearth fires. The fire does not become harmless because Asgard has laws. The primordial realms continue to breathe behind the scenes, influencing the tone of everything that follows. When winter deepens in Midgard, you can feel the whisper of Niflheim in the way the myths were once heard by a listening community. When lightning splits the sky and forests burn, Muspelheim's temperament feels near. These elemental realms are not simply locations, they are explanations. They are mythic reasons for the world's moods. This is part of why the Norse cosmos feels so unified. The later struggles of gods and giants are expansions of the earliest elemental tension. Jotunheim's frost and stone are kin to Niflheim's ancient chill. The fire giants who will march in the last days are not newcomers, they are Muspelheim's children coming home to the story's final act. Even the world tree itself is shaped by this deeper reality. Yggdrasil must draw from wells and sources that carry the memory of cold and the threat of dissolution. The creatures that gnaw at its roots, the stags that browse its leaves, the eagle that watches from above, all of them exist within an ecosystem that began with frost meeting flame. The tree is a living argument that balance is fragile, not guaranteed. It is tempting to imagine Niflheim as purely deathly and Muspelheim as purely evil, because their extremes feel hostile to human life. But the older mythic logic is more nuanced. Niflheim is dangerous, yes, yet it is also the source of waters that nourish the cosmic system. Cold preserves as much as it kills. Frost can be a destructive blade, but it can also be a quiet steward that grants the land a season of rest. Muspelheim is a realm of consuming heat, yes, yet fire is also the principle that transforms raw material into tools. Without fire, there is no forge. Without the forge, there is no hammer that protects Midgard. The dwarf's genius depends on fire's obedience. The god's survival depends on objects that could not exist without flame. This is an elegant tension. The elements that can destroy the world are also the elements that make the world possible. This duality becomes even more poignant when we consider the mythic idea of cycles. The Norse imagination did not offer a tidy eternal heaven where the story ends in permanent peace. It offered a universe where beginnings and endings are linked by the same forces. The fire that helped melt the first ice will later help burn the world's final structures. The cold that framed the first void will later reclaim what the gods tried to stabilize. In other words, Niflheim and Muspelheim are not only about creation, they are about the inevitability that creation and destruction belong to the same family. The universe is a house built with materials that never stop changing their minds. There is a kind of stern beauty in that idea. It is one thing to believe that the world will end because someone is evil. It is another to believe that the world will end because the fundamental energies of existence cannot be restrained forever. That second belief is colder and more mature. It treats apocalypse as a natural consequence rather than a moral tantrum. In such a worldview, heroism is not defined by whether you can stop the end. It is defined by whether you can defend meaning while the end approaches. This is why the prophecies of Ragnarok feel like echoes of the creation story rather than a separate catastrophe. When Surtur advances with his blazing sword, he is Muspelheim's original heat, returning to its most uncompromising form. When the world shudders under cold and darkness, the ancient breath of Niflheim feels present again, as if the cosmos is remembering its earliest temperature. The gods fight not because they believe the elements will suddenly become gentle, but because the ordered realms that grew between cold and fire are worth defending for as long as they can be defended. The human ring of Midgard, the halls of Asgard, the fertile promise of Vanaheim, the luminous mystery of Alfheim, and the deep craft of Svartalfheim are all fragile achievements suspended between extremes. We can step closer to the figure of Surt here, because he is not simply a monster that later arrives for spectacle. He is the mythic personification of the destructive dignity of fire. His name suggests blackness or char, a reminder that fire does not only glow, it also leaves evidence of what it has consumed. In some tellings, he stands at the border of Muspelheim like a sentinel of inevitable ruin, a being who does not need to rage to be terrifying. His threat is not emotional, it is geological, it is cosmic. The idea that such a figure exists from the beginning of mythic memory suggests that the Norse people did not imagine the end of the world as a twist. They imagined it as a truth living quietly in the background, the way a distant volcano lives quietly under a green valley. In Niflheim, the atmosphere is equally solemn. Its cold is not theatrical, but absolute. The roaring well Havergalmir suggests that even the coldest origins possess motion and sound, as if the universe cannot resist movement even when frozen. The image of rivers flowing out of this source into the older void reflects a mind that saw water as life's bloodstream and understood that even ice is only water waiting to change its state. In this, the myth's natural observation shines through. The Norse imagination could be poetic, yes, but it was often rooted in attentive watching of real landscapes. Rivers freeze, rivers thaw. Mist rises from cold water when it meets warmer air. In the myth, that simple truth becomes a sacred mechanism of creation. So by the time we reach the settled drama of gods and giants, we already know that their conflict is nested in something larger, older, and less personal. The Aesir can defeat a giant. They cannot defeat the principle of cold. The Vanir can bless the fields. They cannot command fire to become harmless. The elves can embody beauty. The dwarves can shape miracles. Yet all of them exist under the broader rule of elemental reality. This is a humbling cosmology. Even divinity has limits. As we continue along the branches of Yggdrasil, the story is beginning to feel like a tapestry woven from contrasts. Light and shadow, law and wilderness, craft and fate, life and death, and now the two hardest contrasts of all, cold and fire. The 9 realms are not a catalogue of unrelated fantasy lands. They are the full vocabulary of the Norse attempt to explain why the world is both generous and cruel, why it can invite you to belong and then remind you how quickly belonging can be taken away. Niflheim and Muspelheim give us the meaning of that contradiction in its purest form. They teach us that the universe began in a place where comfort was not the default, and that everything beautiful and habitable was carved out of that truth by will, sacrifice, and fragile balance. They also hint that balance must be continuously defended because the original forces never truly left. They are still there beneath the world, inside the storms, behind the seasonal changes, and waiting in the prophecies that the gods have never been able to ignore. Now the path ahead grows quieter and heavier. The next realm we must face is not a blaze or a blizzard, but an ending with a ruler who does not need weapons to command respect. The road will lead us toward Helheim, where the stories of life's courage turn into the stories of life's costs, and where the cosmos reveals one more truth that the elements began teaching from the start. After the mist and the flame, after the old cold memory of Niflheim and the roaring hunger of Muspelheim, the world tree seems to carry us not into another spectacle of elemental force, but into a silence that finally asks for our full attention. Helheim is not a realm that announces itself with thunder. It does not need to. It waits with the patient authority of nightfall, with the certainty of the tide turning, with the calm truth that every road, heroic or humble, eventually ends in a place where the living must lay down their arguments. In the northern imagination, death is not one flat destination with one locked meaning. It is a landscape of outcomes, shaped by fate, conduct, circumstance, and the old recognition that a life can be worthy without being glorious. That is why Helheim holds such a complicated dignity in the architecture of the 9 realms. It is the home of Hel, a ruler whose very presence destabilizes easy moral categories. She is not a horned caricature of evil. She is a sovereign of inevitability, a custodian of endings, and a reminder that even the gods do not own the final word. Hel herself is born of that dangerous mingling of kinship and contradiction that runs through Loki's bloodline. With the giantess Angry-Boda, he fathers 3 children who become pillars of the coming catastrophe: Fenrir the wolf, Jormungandr the serpent, and Hel the queen of the dead. The myths do not present this family as a simple accident. They present it as the universe producing its own counterweights. Where the gods build walls, the cosmos grows forces that test the walls. Where life tries to establish permanence, the cosmos raises a ruler of endings. Hel is described as half fair and half dark, a body split between vitality and decay, which is an image that works as both physical description and philosophical statement. She is the border made flesh. She is the truth that life and death are not separate nations but adjoining rooms in the same house. The gods, sensing what her rule might mean, cast her into the realm of the dead and grant her authority over those who die of sickness or age, rather than in the crisp blaze of battlefield glory. This decision is both political and cosmic. It is an attempt to organize death, to assign it an administrator, to make what cannot be controlled at least legible. Yet in doing so, the gods also admit something they would rather keep quiet. Their power depends on classification, and classification depends on acknowledging that some forces cannot be abolished. Helheim is often imagined as cold, not because every death must be bleak, but because the Norse worldview is honest about the chilling side of human mortality. It is a place of dim halls and quiet gathering, a realm where the dead are not necessarily tortured but are certainly removed from the warmth of the living world. The absence of sunshine is a symbol of absence of possibility. The living can still change their stories, the dead cannot. This is a sober thought, and it is meant to be. The old poems call the underworld roads long and difficult, and the journey itself becomes part of the metaphysical weight of death. There are gates to pass, thresholds guarded by beings whose function is not cruelty but order. The dead world must have rules, just as the living world does, because without rules, even the most solemn truth becomes chaos. Hell is not described as pleading for worship. She is described as reigning, a figure who does not need to be loved, to be obeyed. The richest window into Helheim's character may be found in the story of Balder, whose death is among the most devastating events in the mythic cycle, not only because of who he is, but because of what his death announces. Balder is often portrayed as radiant and beloved, a god whose presence feels like a promise that goodness can exist without naivety. His mother Frigg seeks to protect him by extracting oaths from the things of the world that they will not harm her son. It is a scene that shows the gods attempting to legislate safety into existence. Yet an omission remains: the mistletoe, small and overlooked. Loki, ever the parasite of certainty, exploits this weakness by guiding Balder's blind brother Hoder to cast the fatal dart. The death is shocking because it is both cosmic and mundane. A mighty god falls because of a humble plant and a trick of malice. The message is sharp. No system of protection is perfect. Fate will find the hairline crack. When Balder descends to Helheim, the living gods are forced to confront the limits of their own sovereignty. Odin's grief is not just paternal or regal, it is existential. The death of Balder feels like the first true frost of the final winter. Hermod rides to Hel's realm, crossing dark valleys and strange boundaries, pleading for Balder's return. The negotiation that follows is one of the most revealing moments in the mythic portrayal of Hel. She does not deny the request out of simple spite. She sets a condition: if all things weep for Balder, he may return to the living. This is a ruler who frames law in the language of cosmic consensus. She is not arbitrary, she is exacting. She requires the world to demonstrate that the loss is truly universal. When the condition fails because one figure refuses to weep, often interpreted as Loki in disguise, Hel keeps Balder. The refusal is not presented as a random cruelty from her throne. It is presented as the consequence of a world that could not fully unite in its grief. This is an underworld that respects rules more than sentiment. It is also a reminder that one act of refusal can tilt the fate of all realms. In that story, Helheim becomes more than a land of the dead. It becomes a political reality in the cosmic order. The gods can challenge giants, bargain with dwarves, and even navigate the older elemental forces, but they cannot simply overthrow death without tearing apart the deeper grammar of existence. Hel's authority is an authority the cosmos itself seems to endorse. It is not only that she has power, it is that her power is appropriate. This is a subtle but important distinction. The Norse imagination does not treat death as the enemy in a simplistic moral war. It treats death as a law that must be faced with dignity. As a result, Helheim is not the site of a final villain who can be defeated to rescue reality from sorrow. It is the site of the final boundary that gives life its urgency. This perspective also helps explain why Norse afterlife beliefs appear layered rather than singular. The fallen warriors chosen by Odin are taken to Valhalla. Freyja receives half of the fallen in her own domain. Those who die at sea may be claimed by powers associated with the ocean. Those who die of illness or old age may go to hell. These pathways suggest a worldview that is less concerned with moral judgment in the later theological sense, and more concerned with the circumstances of life and death as part of a larger, almost ecological understanding. A person is not necessarily condemned because they did not die with a sword in hand. Many lives are not designed for glory, and yet they are still lives within the world's sacred accounting. Helheim becomes the realm that grants weight to the ordinary, acknowledging that a quiet death does not erase the value of a quiet life. If you listen closely, you can hear the echo of real human experience in this structure. The Norse world honored the warrior, but it also knew fishermen, mothers, old people whose wisdom anchored families, and farmers who fought winter with patience rather than steel. A mythic system that assigns dignity to these forms of life through a realm like Helheim is not an accident. It is a cultural truth transposed into cosmic scale. The dead are not only the spectacular, they are the countless who endured. Hell oversees a kingdom of the uncelebrated, and in doing so she becomes, in a strange way, one of the most democratic rulers in the 9 realms. Yet Helheim is not soft. It is still a place where the cold of Niflheim seems to seep into the architecture of death. The imagery of dark halls, of gates, of a border river, of an underworld dog guarding the threshold. All of these motifs contribute to an atmosphere in which death is respected rather than romanticized. The living cannot simply stroll in and out of this realm without consequences. The journey of a living god to Helheim is a mythic exception that proves the rule. The dead belong to Hell's order once the final line is crossed. This is why the realm carries such narrative gravity as the myths move toward their end. When Ragnarok approaches, Helheim is not a passive setting waiting for the story's last chapter. It is an active reservoir of forces. The dead will have their own role as the boundaries between realms weaken. The cosmos that was built from the body of a giant will face a renewed uprising of the old forces that were never truly conquered. This is where Helheim's significance expands beyond the personal. The realm is tied to the final war, not only because Hel is Loki's child, but because death itself must have a place in any apocalypse. The end of the world requires the mobilization of everything the world contains, including what the world has tried to set aside. When the prophecies describe the last battle, they do not describe only Asgard's champions and Jotunheim's armies. They describe chaos rising from multiple directions. The wolf breaks its bonds. The serpent uncoils and poisons the sky and sea. The fire giants march under Surtra's blazing authority. The gods take their positions with grim resolve. Across the world tree, even the hidden realms of craft and light feel the tremor of destiny. And Helheim, with its quiet legions of the dead, is part of that tremor. It is as though all the endings that have been carefully stored in Hell's kingdom are finally called into the open, not as a moral punishment, but as the inevitable arithmetic of fate. And yet there is a lingering tenderness in this grim architecture. The Norse imagination, for all its severity, allows the possibility of renewal after catastrophe. The world may burn, the seas may rise, the old alliances may shatter, but the stories also hint that something survives. New life emerges, a rebuilt world breathes again. The sun's course is renewed through a daughter who takes up the bright path. In this context, Helheim can be seen not only as a place of endings, but as a place that preserves the reality that endings are part of the cycle rather than the final insult. If Niflheim and Muspelheim taught us that creation came from the meeting of extremes, Helheim teaches us that meaning is not undone by death. Meaning is sharpened by it. to picture Helheim truly, imagine a long road descending from the familiar worlds. Imagine the sound of your own footsteps fading into a thicker silence. Imagine a gate that does not creak with menace, but stands with the steady authority of a law that has never been repealed. On the other side are halls where the dead gather, not in punishment but in permanence, their stories finished, their desires cooled into memory. Hell sits as a ruler who does not need a crown of gold, because her power is the kind that no other sovereign can truly rival. Odin's throne depends on loyalty and battle readiness. Freya's peace depends on harvests and the fragile goodwill of the world. Thor's protection depends on the hammer and his own endurance. Hel's rule depends on the simplest and most absolute truth of all. Everything that lives must one day join her ledger. She does not conquer, she receives. This does not make her merciful in the sentimental sense, and it does not make her cruel, it makes her essential. The 9 realms began as a web of living forces held together by Yggdrasil's roots and branches. They grew into a complex society of gods, giants, humans, elves, dwarfs, fire, and frost. They moved toward apocalypse, with the inevitability of a story that has always known its final rhythm. In that broad arc, Helheim is the realm that ensures the cosmos never lies to itself about what life costs. So we reach the end of our journey through the 9 realms, not with a triumphant anthem, but with a quiet understanding. Asgard taught us that duty is the price of order. Vanaheim taught us that abundance is power. Alfheim taught us that beauty may be real and dangerous. Svartalfheim taught us that miracles are forged with sweat and risk. Midgard taught us that courage is most sacred where life is most fragile. Jotunheim taught us that the wild is ancient and necessary. Niflheim and Muspelheim taught us that creation is born from extremes that never truly sleep. And Helheim teaches us that every triumph, every harvest, every love, every battle, every quiet evening by a hearth is made more precious by the simple fact that it cannot last forever. In the deep quiet of Hell's kingdom, the noise of the upper realms does not vanish, but it becomes something like distant surf, a reminder that the living world continues above, for now, with its feasts and wars and bright mornings and long winters, with gods who still argue against fate even when they know its shape. The world tree stands, wounded but upright. The Norns continue their work. The serpent still bites its tail in the outer sea. The wolf still strains against the chain of prophecy. The fire waits beyond the horizon of time. And the dead wait too, not in impatience, but in the stillness of those who have already learned what the living are only beginning to understand, that the story of the 9 realms is not a promise of safety, but a promise that meaning is worth defending even when the ending is certain, and that the quiet kingdom at the end of roads is not only a destination, but a mirror held up to life itself.